Story 1. It was a dark and stormy night when a group of teenagers decided to explore the woods on the outskirts of their town. They had heard rumors of a mysterious church hidden deep in the forest, and they were determined to find it. As they trudged through the dense foliage, the rain soaked through their clothes and the wind howled through the trees. Lightning flashed overhead, casting eerie shadows across their path. After what seemed like hours, they stumbled upon the church. It was old and weathered, with crumbling stone walls and a tall steeple that pointed towards the sky. The door was slightly ajar, creaking ominously in the wind. Despite their trepidation, the teenagers pushed open the door and stepped inside. The church was dark and musty, with cobwebs clinging to the corners and the scent of decay lingering in the air. But there was something else, too. A feeling of malevolence that seemed to permeate every inch of the space. As they explored further, they came across an altar in the center of the room. It was covered in strange symbols and markings, and there was a strange energy pulsing from it. The teenagers couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a priest, clad in black robes and a hood that obscured his face. He spoke in a low, guttural voice, warning the teenagers that they had trespassed on sacred ground and would face dire consequences. The teenagers tried to flee, but the door was stuck. They were trapped. The priest began to chant, and the symbols on the altar began to glow with an eerie light. The teenagers felt a sense of dread wash over them as they realized that they were about to become sacrifices. But just as the priest was about to strike, there was a blinding flash of light, and the church was consumed by flames. The teenagers managed to escape, but they never forgot the horror they had experienced that night. Years later, the town was plagued by a series of disappearances. People would venture into the woods and never return. It wasn't until a group of hikers stumbled upon the ruins of the church that the truth was finally revealed. It turned out that the church had been built by a satanic cult that had used it for dark rituals and sacrifices. The teenagers had stumbled upon one such ceremony, and had narrowly escaped with their lives. But the cult had continued to operate in secret, luring unsuspecting victims to their deaths in the woods. The hikers discovered a hidden cellar beneath the church, where the cult had kept their victims. It was filled with bones and other evidence of their crimes. The town was horrified by the revelation, and the woods were declared off-limits to the public. But there were those who still believed that the cult was active, that they continued to lure victims to their deaths in the woods. And so the legend of the church in the woods lived on, a warning to all who dared to venture too far into the darkness. Story 2. It was a cold and dreary night when three friends, Joan, Sarah, and Alex, decided to explore the abandoned church on the edge of their town. They had heard rumors of strange occurrences in the old building, and were curious to investigate. As they approached the church, they could see that it was old and decrepit, with vines crawling up the sides and a creaking door that swung ominously in the wind. The windows were boarded up, but there was a faint glow emanating from inside. Despite their misgivings, the friends pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was musty and stale, and there was a feeling of dread that permeated every inch of the space. As they made their way deeper into the church, they heard strange whispers and murmurs that seemed to be coming from the shadows. Suddenly, they saw movement out of the corner of their eyes. When they turned to look, they saw the outlines of dark, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of the room. The friends felt their hearts race as they realized that they were not alone. They tried to flee, but the door had been locked from the outside. The friends were trapped, with no way out. As they huddled together, they saw a dark, hooded figure emerge from the shadows. It was a priest, with eyes that glowed red in the darkness. He spoke in a low, guttural voice, warning the friends that they had trespassed on sacred ground and would face the consequences. The friends tried to reason with the priest, but he was unmoved. He began to chant, and the symbols on the walls began to glow with an eerie light. The friends felt a sense of unease wash over them as they realized that they were about to become sacrifices. Just as the priest was about to strike, there was a blinding flash of light, and the church was consumed by flames. The friends managed to escape, but they never forgot the horror they had experienced that night. Years later, John returned to the town to investigate the mysterious events that had occurred in the church. He discovered that the building had once been used by a satanic cult, who had performed dark rituals and sacrifices within its walls. The cult had been driven out by a group of townspeople, but the church had never been used again. Despite the efforts of the townspeople to keep the church closed and off limits, there were those who continued to believe in the power of the cult. They whispered rumors of strange occurrences in the woods, and warned travelers to stay away from the church at all costs. As John left the town, he couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness of the church still lingered, waiting for its next victim. The legend of the church lived on, a warning to all who dared to venture too far into the unknown. Story 3. It was a dark and stormy night when a group of friends decided to explore the abandoned church in their small town. The church had been closed for years, and its walls were covered in vines and cobwebs. Despite the warnings of local residents, the group ventured inside, their flashlights barely piercing the darkness. As they made their way through the church, they heard strange noises coming from the cellar. Curiosity getting the better of them, the group descended into the depths of the cellar. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from their flashlights. Suddenly, they heard a door creak open. A chill ran down their spines as they saw the outline of a figure emerging from the darkness. The figure was tall and gaunt, with sunken eyes and a twisted smile. Its skin was gray and leathery, and it moved with an unnatural grace. The figure began to speak in a voice that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. It welcomed the group to its lair and invited them to stay for dinner. The friends tried to run, but the figure was too fast. They found themselves trapped in the cellar, with no way out. The figure revealed itself to be a demon, and it had been waiting for years for new victims to torment. The demon began to torture the friends, taking pleasure in their pain and suffering. It spoke in tongues, and the walls of the cellar shook with its power. The friends felt their sanity slipping away as they were consumed by fear and despair. Just when it seemed like all was lost, a bright light shone through the darkness. The demon recoiled, screaming in agony as it was banished back to the depths of hell. The friends were saved, but they were forever scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. Years later, the friends returned to the town, determined to uncover the truth about the demon in the church cellar. They discovered that the church had been built on an ancient burial ground, and that the demon had been summoned by a cult to do their bidding. Despite the cult's destruction, the demon remained, waiting for new victims to torment. The friends knew that they had to destroy the demon once and for all, but they also knew that it would be a deadly and terrifying mission. As they left the town, they couldn't help but feel that the demon was still out there, watching and waiting. They knew that they would never be truly safe until the demon was defeated. The legend of the demon in the church cellar lived on, a warning to all who dared to explore the unknown. To all who dared to